Welcome back to the Agents Angle, where in the world of football agents, effective communication is often priceless. And because of that, some claim that FIFA is in need of a hug and feels under fire from many angles. With me, Jonathan Booker.
And me, Peter Paleologos. Featured in this episode, we have all the news for agents regarding the licensing requirements from FIFA and long-awaited changes to FIFA's CPD provisions, which may have gone largely unnoticed as very few, if any, agents seem to have been told.
In addition to that, we also look at the first reports of a manager, agent and club possibly falling foul of the FFAR regulations, as well as us dropping a bombshell in regards to FIFA's Agent Working Group.
All that to come on this episode of The Agent's Angle.
Everyone will be glad to hear that I'm not going to attempt any Norwegian on this episode, but apologies to my newly found Norwegian friends if they listen back to the last episode where I did make a poor attempt as such. And despite me trying to replicate the calmness and measured approach of the Norwegians, I get the feeling this may well be the first episode this season where I'm about to lose my cool just a bit.
Jonathan, you don't need to lose your cool. I mean, Norway, a beautiful place. We know you came back there from a conference, which will inform us and all the listeners today. But I will say that you're passionate on the issues that affect the agents world. And when you don't see them addressed effectively, which we've seen a lot of times before, there always seems to be new issues and challenges that arise in the football agent space. And we're happy to unpack many of those, including any issues that may have arisen at the Norway conference that you were at.
Yeah, and we'll come back to some of those issues. But I'm going to start off with something that came about more by luck than judgment. And as many know, we mentioned there, I was invited to present at the Nordic Sports Law Conference in Oslo last week, which was a great event and some really nice and knowledgeable people. And I was assigned the topic of a critical view of the FFAR. And in preparation for that presentation, I wanted to ensure that I was across any changes that FIFA may have made in regards to the regulations, agent platform, and other elements. As to be quite honest, I don't trust FIFA at the moment to not be sneaky and change things or add things and then likely not tell anyone when it comes to agent regulations and agent-related matters. And to no surprise, it appears FIFA have been either sneaky or negligent on something that they should actually be praised for in a way. And that is the fact that there are now 7 CPD modules, continuous professional development, rather than just 4 on the FIFA Agents platform, with the 3 new additions being anti-trafficking, third-party influence and third-party ownership, and also rules for the employment of coaches. But before I let you comment on this development, Peter, it appears that you may actually be on FIFA's good list in the run-up to Christmas, unlike myself, as you're actually credited and named as a contributor on one of these modules, the one on anti-trafficking. But I believe this was as much of a surprise to you as it was to me when I told you about it.
Yes, it was definitely a surprise. I wasn't sort of aware that something of this nature would occur, but I will say this. I do like the 3 additions on the agents portal. As you mentioned, anti-trafficking, one that I was involved in, third-party influence and third-party ownership. Still a very interesting topic. That's TPI and TPO for shorthand, and rules for the employment of coaches. Now, I mentioned TPO and TPI. That's supposed to be still maybe on the periphery, but we always know it's in the background. I haven't done any of the courses, Jonathan. I'm interested to see if there's any interrelationship there with covering the multi-party ownership issue or how agents are involved in club representation and lately some investment, and these issues need to be educated on. So I'm very interested to see how that course pans out. Coaches, that's a big client base now for a lot of agents. It's a different strategy when you deal with coaches because it's not so much transfer window based. Jobs can come up anytime, and you may even be managing assistant coaches. So you've got to always look out for local opportunities. But also with coaches, they're not always covered by the regulations like the players, especially at a national level or a football league level. So other regulations may apply, and also national law to coaching contracts. And you mentioned anti-trafficking. This is a very important area, trafficking of players. I was part of a focus group and I did revise the initial module for anti-trafficking. That was a while ago. And it was quite interesting, but it's much needed because we know, especially from Africa and elsewhere as well, players being brought into Europe mainly, very concerning on what happens to a lot of those players who are misled by nefarious agents and other actors. So I'll be interested to see what that module offers. But overall, 3 very interesting modules.
I have actually done the trafficking module already, and some of those areas are covered, but only briefly touched on. It's just no surprise that FIFA, one, didn't ask you permission to put your name on it or let you know they'd put your name on it, because I know personally they've put my name on documents where I haven't given permission either. But firstly, the praise. Well done, FIFA, on the release of these new CPD modules. Credit where credit is due. But now the criticism. We've only been waiting over a year for 3 additional modules. The good news is that for established agents or legacy agents who require 40 annual CPD points, we don't have to do the same CPD this year as last year as we have these 3 new modules. Also, because of one of those new modules, the trafficking one comes with 40 credits rather than just the usual 10. It seems that you can complete your annual CPD requirements for this year in one go with one module. It actually took me roughly 25 minutes to complete the module. But as someone who may not be fluent in English, Spanish, or French, I acknowledge it could prove more difficult given some of the potential misinterpretation of the wording. But even then, it is a lot of what I see as common sense. And I would say you could guess the answers in the assessment quite easily, not least as the distractors, as a training or exam developer would call them, and multiple choice phrasing is quite predictable. But knowing FIFA like we do, I recommend agents get on the agents platform ASAP, bag the 40 credits for the trafficking module before FIFA reduce it to 10, or indeed recognise this is another bug in the system and it should only be 10 credits for this module in the first place. Then at least you can relax until next year and do the other modules at your leisure to raise your awareness.
Well, I'm not aware of 40 points for one module. I know that as legacy agents, we need to do 40 points.
It's 40 points, Peter.
Pretty much
you can clean them up for a year in one.
And well, there you go. Overall, I think it's good to get modules out of the way so you can focus on the business. Also, it shouldn't just be CPD, I think, looking forward. There are plenty of conferences, workshops, webinars that agents should be doing outside of CPD. I know there's 7 modules now, but there's a lot of learnings to be had. As agents, we're always learning. And one course I always say, and this is probably not going to be part of CPD, is scouting is another area we need to focus on. There's some good scouting courses out there that will help many agents who want to get more skills in talent identification. I think that's a skill that should be part of sort of the agent's skill base or skill set, if I should say, Jonathan.
Yeah, on that topic, the other interesting thing on the CPD area of the agent platform, Peter, is that I noticed that the agents portal may in the future be allowing agents to upload CPD from external providers in terms of licensing requirements, which is something we have recommended to FIFA on numerous occasions over several years, as have others. And in fact, we and others even suggested subject areas and module topics to FIFA, which they largely, if not totally, ignored. So on one hand, this external CPD enhancement should be welcome. But my skepticism of FIFA tells me from past experience of how they operate that this may be one, FIFA deciding they can't be bothered to develop the CPD anymore and are getting others to do it, dare I say, preferred providers. And or 2, could FIFA, in licensing the development of further modules to external providers, be a nice little additional revenue stream for FIFA and possibly extra costs to the agents?
That's an interesting point. We know consultants, training providers love this sort of stuff where they can have an offering and get a remit from, say, someone like FIFA to develop modules. It's an area where a lot of people will be looking for opportunities. I actually think external CPD will happen down the track. It is inevitable, but it's not just for the consultants. I think this is something that the agents associations need to consider offerings which can be recognised by FIFA. And that's where Agents Association, we know there's quite a few around the world, both regional and international. even approaching FIFA and saying, what about this external CPD courses for our members? And this is a bit of a joke, Jonathan. For those listening to the agent's angle and the agent's angle guests, maybe they can get a CPD point for that. Actually, I'm joking, but there you go. Now, I want to move on to the conference. We mentioned Norway. I'll give a little bit more detail. I'm referring to the Nordic Sports Law Conference, which took place in Oslo, Norway, on the 1st and 2nd November 2024. You're one of the presenters or speakers at that conference. And I would say 2 sessions piqued my interest. I've had a look at the 2 days of the schedule. And one was, of course, FFAR, which you gave a presentation in, Jonathan. And the other one was image rights. I'm not saying the other presentations were great, but they're the 2 that really intrigued me from my point of view, at least. I saw with the FFAR that Richard Parrish, who we know is a major contributor to the agent space with a lot of his papers, gave a presentation, as did FIFA, and also one of our previous guests, Maria Carlson, who's on this podcast in relation to FFAR. Can you tell us what was discussed and how it went overall at this Nordic conference, Jonathan?
Yeah, there were some really good presentations. Apart from that, there was an element on human rights and a very good presentation, actually from somebody at FIFA. I think his name was Andreas Graf, and that was a very insightful. And there was one on mediation as well. But a key focus was the FFAR. And Maria actually presented on behalf of FIFA, which I found interesting. But firstly, what lovely people the Nordic people are, and incredibly welcoming and friendly. But I'm not going to differentiate between the nations, as it was obvious they have enough material for friendly banter between themselves without me giving someone more ammunition. But a big thank you to Espen for the invitation, and also Helena, Ronnie, and Hildegard and their team, who coordinated what was a really good event. Now, I've heard some indirect feedback, and it seems some people commented that my presentation was a bit fruity, if not fiery, in terms of going after FIFA and the FFAR a bit. And because I was a guest, I was actually on my best behaviour, and I wanted to replicate the calmness of my Norwegian hosts. And I reined in a lot of the criticism of FIFA and the FFAR. So if people think that presentation was critical, they obviously haven't listened to this show too much in the past. And you saw my presentation before I went to Norway, Peter, so you can pass comment on that presentation and whether it was fiery or whether I did moderate the criticism. And I actually followed a presentation by FIFA on the reasoning behind FFAR. And with that, the most difficult thing for me on the day was focusing on my presentation rather than responding to the FIFA presentation. And believe me, there was a lot to comment on from their presentation in terms of repeated misinformation and misrepresentation.
Jonathan, I saw your presentation. Obviously, you gave me a copy to look at before you presented. And I thought it was very well researched and a lot of details, provide a lot of context, the issues at play with FFAR, what are the major issues that FFAR faces, whether there was things like true engagement with stakeholders, where to from here. And I think the most important part of your presentation was you looked at the consequences and effects that arose from the FFAR and its implementation and what was in there. And I think a lot of the audience wouldn't be aware of a lot of this sort of thing because you're an experienced agent and you've got huge insight into basically what happens. You're at the coalface, but you also know the regulatory issues and the landscape. So your presentation was very much bringing that all together. The regulatory issues and challenges, FIFA, how their journey with FFAR, the picture of the business and how the FFAR affects the agent's business, and how the agent business now intersects with the FFAR and the problems that we have with some parts of the FFAR, and obviously there's legal challenges as well. Sometimes we see a lot of presenters being lawyers. I mean, I'm a lawyer as well, or academics, but it's good to see, and not because you're a co-host, more down-to-earth type agents and presenters like yourself giving their view on FFAR or other agent topics, because we can always go for the academic or legal point of view, but that sometimes can be also speculative or risk-averse or scenario-based. Whereas your presentation, having gone through it, and it was a strong and long and very detailed presentation, which for me, your presentation was a journey of FFAR and really well put together. And I think it would have opened up a lot of eyes for a lot of the delegates at that conference, Jonathan.
Yeah, what I tried to do, I tried to take it all the way back to the start of agent regulations and even through RWWI, the regulations on working with intermediaries. So that's covering something like 35 years in 45 minutes, which wasn't easy. But the next bit, there's a likelihood I'm going to lose my temper, and you're going to frown on it a bit if I do swear, and I apologize for that in advance. We will beep it out, Peter, so don't worry. But this next bit of commentary from me isn't just about FIFA's presentation in Norway. It's about many months now, if not years, of FIFA's ignorance, aloofness, and downright stupidity, not least the lack of consideration they've shown to many agents, not least one case of an agent friend of mine who's very ill at the moment, to whom they demonstrated little compassion or consideration. But on reflection, after Norway, I have a few things to say that I chose not to say at the event in regards to FIFA. Not least as those people sent by FIFA to the event aren't the ones necessarily to direct criticism at. And also, it would be a waste of energy as one person sent by FIFA, despite being on the Agent Working Group, the AWG, doesn't represent an agent association and wasn't an agent pre-2015. And the other, according to reports I found out, is no longer at FIFA anyway, and seemingly has little knowledge of agent regulation history. Plus, if that person is listening, you need to swat up on your knowledge of mediation practice as well, because you're woefully short in that department also. So, firstly, despite being quite prepared with what they were going to present and claim how good and wise FIFA are with FFAR and agent regulations, I could have spoken for 45 minutes on their presentation alone and identified all the falsehoods and misrepresentations they made. Not least the incorrect dates for agent regulations that they gave and the absence of them talking about the required CPD for agents adequately. Then we had the age-old falsehood and false flag, as I refer to it now, about agent service fees being disproportionate in growth when compared to solidarity and compensation payments. We've said it before when Jan Kleiner said it at the FIFA Law Annual Review, the FLAR, and the FIFA president then repeated it in a statement. What an absolute load of flaming hogwash. You, FIFA, control solidarity and training compensation mechanisms and payments and haven't evolved it for some 15 years or more, to my knowledge. It's largely nothing to do with agent commissions, and if anything, agent activity helps increase those solidarity and training compensation distributions and payments. So just shut up on this false narrative, FIFA. It doesn't wash. And maybe the reason you delete comments correcting this narrative on such things as LinkedIn are evidence that you know it is a misrepresentation of the problem in the first place. Then in FIFA's presentation, we had comments about the AWG, the FIFA Agent Working Group, and that a representative from Japan is on the AWG. Well, that was news to me, as it seems to be to many others. Maybe that announcement was included in the non-existent circular about the new CPD modules. But then again, I think my news on the new CPD modules was actually news for the FIFA presenters in Norway as well.
Wow, interesting that all these new announcements and certain people are not across it. I mean, I wasn't at the event, so it's hard for me to comment and dissect what happened at the FFAR session at this Nordic conference. But I'm not aware of any representative from Japan. I have some close relationships with the Japanese Football Agent Associations, actually one or two of their members and secretary, and this is news to me as well. Definitely not aware of that. I have noticed something recently that the data we're getting seems to be all over the place. You talked about FIFA and some of the data they put about, I think, agents' fees and solidarity and training. That's interesting. I mean, we need to be across all this key information. And I want to push it back in a sense to the agent's perspective that agents' fees have a lot to do with transfer movement and transfer inflation. And whatever's represented as data is very important to understand where agents' fees fall into the whole transfer marketplace. I did see something and sort of digress in terms of Transfer Room, platform that some agents use. And I did notice that they mentioned about transfer inflation over the last decade, and transfer fees have inflated consistently around 15% from 2010 to 2019. And obviously it was a bit of deflation in 2020 and 21 because of COVID. And then the trend came back up 2022 to 2023. However, spending has decreased again, and I don't know if this was also represented at the conference with FIFA's figures or whatever was discussed there. What they're saying in 2024,
FIFA, Peter, never put player salaries or transfer fees alongside these other fees. They only compare agent service fees with training compensation and solidarity, and it's to present that false narrative. And I've just had enough of it.
understand, and Transfer Room, in part of their research, said this year spending decreased again, maybe likely to financial fair play, the European rules, the English rules, and profitability and sustainability restrictions. So things have dropped off. But there's always a correlation between that, not just training compensation and solidarity, but we also got to look at the trend in relation to transfer fees, because that's a big correlation to agent fees. And when there has been transfer inflation and vis-a-vis agent fees inflation, which I doubt there has been, because there hasn't been that many deals, and part of this research shows that. So all I'm saying is there's got to be a little bit more transparency around the figures, and if only certain figures were put forward, that's concerning because you don't have the holistic picture. So we need to put some context around this, and maybe I wasn't at the conference, but that context wasn't properly given.
And it's about time it was given, and maybe we'll do something on that. We've already spoken about it, but to present it visually, I think would be accurate. But from the conference, I like to think I raised awareness for the FIFA presenters who were there on various topics, not just that. And these are topics they really should have known about. But they were sent there to take any fire and flack, as others really don't seem to care or haven't got the balls to face the music. And one of those even backed out from this event on this occasion. But also in my presentation, I dropped a little bit of a bombshell for FIFA and those listening. And it is something we've been sitting on for some time. And I felt this may be the right time to light the fuse, so to speak. Not least as FIFA thought it would be a good idea to send a member of the Agent Working Group to present on FIFA's behalf. And I think this will be of interest to TFF, EFA, PROFA, many agents out there, even the ECJ and the media, as neither of us have mentioned this to anyone until now. But I let the cat out the bag in Norway, so what the hell, let's tell everyone. We discovered some time ago that the FIFA Agent Working Group, the AWG, appointed by FIFA, not elected by agents or anything like that, had amongst its agent members at the time of their appointment or soon thereafter were not seemingly FIFA licensed agents. And that was at a time that the FIFA agents directory was available when we could check it, and FIFA hadn't removed that directory. Yet further to this, and more recently, using the third-party licensed agent directory that we've mentioned numerous times in recent weeks, we checked there in recent months on the members listed by FIFA as members of the AWG, and I did so again in the run-up to Norway, and there were now a greater number of AWG agent members either suspended or not listed, so arguably unlicensed still. Now, there are reasons why some people may not be listed, such as the German representative, given the injunction on the FFAR in Germany. So we've taken some of those into account. But as I said in Norway, this could mean that almost 40%, 40, of the agent representatives on the AWG may be unlicensed or suspended. And to clarify, and I said this in Norway, the supposed premise of something like the AWG is a good thing. Just in this form, it's turning into a bit of a joke with so many questions to answer about its remit, its power, its knowledge base. Why two Argentinians? Why two Spaniards? But only one representative from Africa. But without doubt, it should not have unlicensed or suspended agents on it. Isn't that one of FIFA's supposed objectives with the FFAR, to tackle unlicensed agent activity? And with more than just a hint of irony, if not sarcasm, could FIFA have a hidden information problem on their hands here? And before anyone asks, the answer is no. I don't want to be on the AWG, and never have. Whilst I support the premise of something like the AWG, this was too little, too late, a questionable structure, and sadly, I think now taints some of the good people on the AWG, not those who are there just to climb up FIFA's backside.
Jonathan, what can I say? That's quite a critique there of FIFA and the AWG. But yeah, I agree. No unlicensed agents should be on the FAWG. That is wrong. You cannot have unlicensed agents on there. Further, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The agents need more circulation of information coming out from the FAWG. We're only hearing tidbits. What's next? What's happening in the pipeline? What was discussed? What are the new issues on the agenda? What are the initiatives that are happening? Are there MOUs? What are the next steps? What's going to happen after the ECJ decision? Whatever it may be, we need information to come out. The FAWG, or the AWG as you call it, should be for agents reporting to agents. And I'm not sure that is always the case. Further, and for transparency and fairness, the FAWG also needs an Oceania representative. New Zealand, Fiji, there are other countries. There's no Oceania representative. You mentioned two Spanish. You need an Oceania representative. Also, some of the FAWG members need to start holding focus groups with agents so they can raise issues and get feedback and what concerns agents right now. We're over 1 year since FFAR came in. What's worked? What hasn't? I haven't seen any focus group. Nothing's happened. So for me, there are some concerns, and the messaging coming out of the FAWG, just looking at your observations, Jonathan, is not super clear cut. So that needs to be fixed as well. Optics matter, and FAWG or AWG needs to be more proactive in what it's providing in terms of its communications or comms, if you want to call it, to agents. Now, I'm going to move on to another topic. I was actually at a meeting that was hosted by the European Football Agents Association, and this was a meeting of the lawyers group. There's a lot of lawyers who are also agents and are part of the European Football Agents Association from different European member associations. And the discussion was, and obviously we mentioned the Diarra case and what FIFA will do going on, how's business going around different markets in Europe since Diarra has impacted. But I was interested in what happens next, because we know, and we discussed this at a previous episode, FIFA has opened up engagement with different stakeholders to give their views on how to change Article 17, which is the article mainly affected by the Diarra decision about unilateral termination of contracts and players and their rights, etc. One thing that seems that this decision is going to have an impact on is we may see more markets copy the Spanish buyout clauses, because that is a way where to deal with a Diarra decision until it gets clarified further, that the use of buyout clauses by clubs, and a lot of the buyout clauses have to be also negotiated by agents, may be the way going forward. And I know it happens in Spain, but a lot of agents need to look at that option, if it's available in your leagues, as one that maybe can deal with any fallout until the further clarity with a Diarra decision. And also transfer release clauses. There are other clauses, and we've discussed some of these clauses before, what the differences are. There seems to be more important now in terms of what happened with the Diarra decision. Now, the discussion had people from different countries, and one of the Belgian representatives said that in terms of unilateral termination there, the residual or remaining value of the contract must be paid by the player to the club they want to leave. So there's a definitive rule there, but we can't leave a vacuum, and buyout clauses seem to be something that can be maybe a solution or just a stopgap until the Diarra decision and the change to Article 17 goes ahead. Now, the discussion went on to that agents, our role is to ensure any clauses do not penalise when players move. So now we're in a position where, a stronger position, I could say, when we negotiate to make sure a lot of the contractual clauses with the club don't allow for too much penalty when the player needs to move. And that's why I think I mentioned buyout clauses might be a solution, or some sort of transfer release clauses. There was also discussion about when Article 17 does get changed, that there may be need for objective criteria in that regulation, where criteria is set out of what makes a unilateral termination and what's the outcome of it. We know, because unlike employment law everywhere or workers everywhere, football is still a little bit different. Football employees or contractors or players are a little bit different because we have a transfer system, the transfer of money, whether it's transfer fees, sell-on fees, We also got training comp, which you mentioned before, and solidarity contributions. We've still got a transfer system as well as a transfer market. Football's a little bit unique in that regard when players are moving jobs. So that needs to be addressed. And a lot of I would say the 10, 12 lawyers agree that probably that objective criteria needs to be stipulated in future regulations. I'll just finish on one or two more points here. That since Diarra, national laws and regulation play a more important role in countries, especially employment laws, because we keep forgetting that employment laws do apply to football clubs in their national systems. And the last thing I think is we might start seeing collective bargaining agreements. We know they exist in the MLS in Australia, but we may see more of that as one way of dealing with the Diarra outcome. Maybe even an international CBA, collective bargaining agreement between possibly FIFA and FIFA. I'm not sure how an international one will work, but definitely national ones will probably be important, Jonathan.
Yeah, I wasn't privy to that meeting as I'm not a lawyer or an EFA member anymore. But I welcome any positive developments that represent the industry as a whole and the role of legitimate professional and licensed agents. My one reservation with this, and it is early days of this initiative, I think it's the first meeting, is the segregation of agents who are lawyers from those who are solely agents, as many agents aren't lawyers despite having legal knowledge. And we know that even some so-called lawyers in the sports agency world aren't even lawyers. So hopefully EFA will relay some of the developments of the lawyer group to non-lawyer agents as well. I'm sure Roberto will be across that. Not least as the last thing we want to see is more division amongst the agents. But if this moves the industry forward as a whole, whether it be EFA or one of the other agents associations and organisations, many of which we consider friends of the agents angle, then great. Such initiatives should be welcomed and encouraged. It's just unfortunate that those same organisations can't yet find that common ground. But that is something we've been working on, so hopefully we can progress that to benefit all involved in good time.
Yes, I know one of your key goals is to bring agent groupings together. But yes, Roberto Branco Martins is the General Secretary of European Football Agents Association. You mentioned Roberto, but some listeners may not know him fully. But sooner or later, I think in terms of unity, sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it's a step too far to actually try and bring them together. I think it's more a matter of finding that common ground on which they can agree and let the other things, let them battle those out. But I think there's got to be some common ground. We know there is.
Oh, there is definitely on caps, on whether there can be, multiple representation. There's quite a few issues that bring the agent groupings together. I will say this, probably the outcome on when we get the FFAR decision and the European Court of Justice, you mentioned the ECJ, hopefully with the conclusions of that case, you may see a lot of the agent grouping associations coming together. But you also need competitive tension amongst agents associations because they're all trying to promote their members' interests. And I'm going to turn my attention to one of those associations, UEFA. And I'm not talking about the European Federation or Confederation for Football. I'm talking about UEFA, which is the Agent Association of the Americas. And they've signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with FIFA. And I'll just go through their announcement. It was about a week ago. Historic day for American agents. The UEFA Agents Association of America makes history by signing an agreement of understanding, an MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding. An MOU is really what that's supposed to mean. With FIFA consolidating its position as the only agent association recognized in the Commonwealth, which is the South American Federation, and CONCACAF regions, which is the North and Central American region. This milestone marks a new chapter in the cooperation and development of football in America, strengthening the relationship between UEFA America, the Union Intermediary Agents Football in America. That's finally, I know the name now, and FIFA. I'll just go briefly what the agreement has in its foundations: to establish ethical and quality standards in the representation of players, clubs, and coaches, to promote transparency and equity in transfers, to promote the development of football in the region, to strengthen the collaboration in the fight against the intrusion of the activity of unlicensed subjects, which probably I assume unlicensed agents, and ensure the best conditions of the agents in their professional activity. And finally, it's a new era for the American football agents, a big move. And they're saying with this MOU with FIFA that reaffirms their commitment to the integrity and progress of the football ecosystem.
I think I'm going to limit what I say on this matter, Peter, not least because of the mood I'm in. Needless to say, I am incredibly skeptical on this agreement, if not the two associations involved, namely FIFA and UEFA, in that it's unclear how many licensed agents this association represents and who they actually are. Releases and statements from this association have been questioned in the past, not just by myself. And some have even said they have an uncanny FIFA tone to them. And from some of what I have seen, I actually agree with that. What is this association receiving in return from FIFA for signing up? Is it financial support? Another place on the AWG? At the moment, we don't know. The same MOU, we believe, has been presented to 3 other associations attending the AWG who haven't signed up yet. I wonder why. Was it the same MOU terms or have they rejected it? Are we going to see the full details of what is in this MOU or is it going to be kept confidential? Dare I say, another hidden information problem relating to FIFA?
Some good questions there, Jonathan. For me, do they represent most American agents, football agents, I should say? Will this mean, as you mentioned, other associations also getting an MOU? It has been offered. Was there funding involved? I do know that UEFA now run a course for agents. Don't know if it's the exam course or more of a CPD type course, but that's been funded on an online platform. And I wonder also if the big Argentinian, Uruguayan, Brazilian agents are part of UEFA. There's some big agencies in those markets, and I'm not sure about the membership makeup. But what about also, they say it's for the Americas, that will include North America. What about the big American sport talent management agencies who moved into the football space? Not only bought some of the big English agencies, but also are active in the MLS space and worldwide. Are they members of the UEFA? Not so sure. So there's not as much clarity, but it's a step that is an announcement. And UEFA, the first association or agent association, to basically move to that next step with FIFA in terms of the MOU.
Only FIFA have the answers. But before you wrestle the mic away from me for your favourite feature of Quick Takes, Peter, I want to go to a story that emerged in the English media on the 1st of November, I think it was, just a few days ago, on a topic we have covered, but not really yet in any great detail. And it's a development with regards to the FFAR compared to past agent regulations. And that is the premise that managers and coaches need to now be represented by licensed agents as well. And this story involves a well-known English manager, probably not that well-known outside of England. He's very popular amongst many in football, and I've met him a few times, and he's a thoroughly nice chap. And that is Ian Holloway, who, although he hasn't managed many big clubs, he has had great success with some smaller but notable clubs who have achieved things well beyond their expectations under his management. However, he was appointed as manager of Swindon Town several days ago after a fair amount of time out of club management. It must be 3 or 4 years. And Swindon may now be back in the 4th tier of English football, but back in 1993, they were actually a Premier League club. And following his appointment, Ian Holloway did an interview, it seems, with the club's media, where he reportedly said, and unfortunately I can't do an Ian Holloway accent, but he said, "It was only late last night that I arranged to meet an agent, and before you know it, I am here, which is completely mental to me, but I'm absolutely delighted. I arranged to meet an agent who I haven't signed anything with yet because I wanted to get back on, because I have missed the everyday of being involved with a club." So, in making what appears to be a perfectly honest statement, he may have got himself, the club, and/or the agent involved in a spot of bother with regard to the new agent regulations. But how many managers, coaches, clubs, and even agents could potentially get caught up in similar situations, not just in England, but around the world?
Very likely, Jonathan. I mean, with this case, I had a look at the articles. And the title sort of pretty much says it all. Ian Holloway, at Centre of Football Association, the FA, the English FA probe of a possible breach of agent regulations just 7 days after landing the Swindon Town job. He's facing, not just him, but Swindon also facing FA investigation of possible breach of agent regulations following this managerial appointment. Obviously, you mentioned before he revealed he didn't sign a contract with an agent who brought him to the club. And this admission, which probably was made through the media more than anything else, I would say, Jonathan, appears to be in breach of, this is the Football Association's Football Agent Regulations, Rule 4.1. And I'll just read from the article, which all states this regulation. An FA registered football agent may only perform football agent services for a player, coach, or club after having entered into a representative agreement with that, in this case, coach. Now, the newspaper that sort of broke the original story, contacted the Football Association what it meant about this investigation, but no statement has been provided what they're doing into looking at Mr. Holloway's activity here. The club itself had mentioned that they will assist the Football Association with their inquiries during this time. But this highlights an important thing, to move away a little bit from the article, just at a general level, that under the FFAR, under the Football Association, Football Agent Regulations, paperwork is a must, whether it's a mandate or a paper trail. It can even be WhatsApp messages saying, yes, I agree, etc. Because obviously with coaches, it's a bit different. You may get a job the next day because you don't have to worry about the transfer window. I mentioned that before. It's quick decisions. And if you delay, those decisions can suffer. So sometimes the paperwork's not in order in accordance with FA rules or FFAR rules. So really, it doesn't take much time. And this is a lesson for all. Get some sort of paperwork in order. It doesn't always have to be a full contract. It can be a mandate just written down, but something of a paper trail is needed. And this is about lessons learned, that you don't want to get yourself in trouble with the FA and not complying with the regulations. But it's also good to see as well, on the flip side, the FA looking at these sort of things to make sure that people are doing the right thing in the agent space, in the representation space. Jonathan.
Now, the important thing to point out is this could well be a case where the agent in question already has a contract with the club and is working for them in recruiting the manager rather than representing the manager or coach. So it's unlikely there's a breach of regulations there, and thus really a case of the media jumping the gun with a report. But I sincerely hope that if there is a breach here, the FA look at this sensibly and put it down to what is an honest mistake and thus a warning for the manager and those involved. But also that they see this as an opportunity, if not a platform, to raise awareness of the regulation changes rather than just catch people out. So often we see new regulations and variations to existing ones in football that people are just unaware of. In this case, a licensed agent, I will say, should have known the regulations. The club arguably should have known, and the LMA, the League Managers Association, should have made all their members aware of the agent regulatory changes. Although the LMA, in my experience of the new FFAR and national agent regulations, haven't seemed too interested in the changes regarding managers and coaches when it comes to agents. And you know I'm normally a stickler for the rules and regulations, but personally, I would let this one slide if I was the authorities, the English FA, because the aspect of agent regulations applying to managers and coaches is something relatively new that we all have to get used to. And quite honestly, I think this is a simple mistake by someone who wanted to secure a managerial role in a sport he loves and probably wasn't aware of the regulatory changes since he was last employed as a manager.
Yeah, I hope the outcome is favourable for Mr. Holloway. Business moves fast. Sometimes you don't think of every contingency and every requirement. We know there's not many coaching jobs or managerial jobs available. Very competitive to get a job. And I wish good luck to Mr. Holloway with his new position. And hopefully there aren't too many implications. Maybe it was a slip up. Maybe it was a lack of communication. Things happened very quickly. But I'm sure there is a sufficient explanation here. I'm going to move on to a segment we haven't done for a while, and that's quick takes. I've got a couple of stories I want to go through, and there's a flavour here about what happens in our agent business. The first quick take is a story coming out of Ghana, and we have, I think it's Reverend Osei Kofi, a two-time African Cup of Nations champion with the Ghana Black Stars, the national team. who's urged the Ghana Football Association president, Mr. Kurt Okraku, to step down if he intends to pursue a career as an agent. These comments came out of an observation by Kofi on the president of the Ghana Association, Ghana Football Association, for going to watch the Ghana, I think, under-20 team against Germany, whilst the national team, the senior men's national team, was playing a pivotal African Cup of Nations qualifier. And I'll just quote Mr. Kofi for the record, and we'll have the article in our show notes. But the president of the Football Association was absent during Ghana's match against Sudan. Instead, he focused on football business outside that game. And this is the key quote here. If he wants to pursue a career as a football agent, he should resign from his position as the president of the association, dictate himself fully to the path. I think this observation, and I've seen it sometimes before, that we see agents who say that some football directors, some club presidents, even coaches are trying sometimes to be agents or get involved in the agent side of the business. They sort of know what's good for the player. And I think this observation was made in that light. I'll move into our second quick take, and this one is featuring an agent. It's from the Football España website. And the Surpr agent, Jorge Mendes, introduced the Barcelona president to a Paris Saint-Germain star at the Ballon d'Or Gala that was held recently. And they were there because obviously some of their players were nominated for an award, including Lamine Yamal, Dani Olmo, and a few others. But going back to the agent story, it was revealed that Jorge Mendes introduced the Barcelona president Juan Laporta to PSG midfielder Vitinha. Now, that's interesting because at this stage, and we all know that Barcelona struggled to sign players, especially because of the last 4 or 5 years, their financial issues in trying to get those solved, how much players they can sign. But someone like Jorge Mendes, when he does make introductions, that's what the article says, he does that with intentions. Even those intentions maybe not always come to fruition, but there is a long game or a mid-term game in that. With this article, I think it's just observes what a lot of agents do. They invite key decision makers to showcase players and solutions and raise awareness as part of their planning for the next window. And we see that quite a bit. And in this case, Jorge Mendes finds an opportunity to introduce a power broker to a player that's in demand. Happens all the time. It's about optics. But it's also about, I suppose, planning your business going forward and ascertaining interest in key players so you can plan your next transfer window as an agent, especially as a super agent who's got a lot of good players. But it's time to close. I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. We mentioned the FIFA Agents Working Group, the FAWG, or as Jonathan calls it, the AWG. They're actually meeting on the 17th December 2024. I think it's remotely. I believe it's in Miami, but they've got their next meeting on the 17th December 2024. We just saw an announcement of the FIFA Football Law Annual Review, the FLAR, as you mentioned, Jonathan. That's going to happen in Miami on the 27th and 28th of February, 2025. So going all the way to the US. Now, a couple of more announcements. The Italian Football Agent Association and their partners are hosting at the Stadium Olimpico in Rome a meeting of the National Football Agents of Italy on the 20th of November 2024. So probably less than 2 weeks to go for that. So that's a very important meeting because we know with Italy, they have their own regulations. So important meeting of the National Football Agents there. And one final one that just came across in the last couple of days, the Football Forum, which is the agent association, which has a lot of super agents as members. There's a players and agents talk in Vienna, also in November, on the 29th of November, 2024.
There was one event you forgot to mention, Peter, or very modestly chose not to mention, and that was your book launch in Melbourne. So I don't know if you want to give people a little bit of an overview of that, not so much a plug, but just a bit of an overview.
I was afraid you're going to ask me this question. Yes, last week I held a book launch in Melbourne, Australia, with a lot of football industry people and some friends, colleagues, and people from the Australian football business or soccer business. We also use the term soccer here. I have had a book published. It's called The Agent's Game, the stories of the Australian football agents. It went very well, the launch. I mean, I don't like talking about myself too much, but briefly, the book is aimed to inform anyone interested in the agent business, I would say, There's not much literature on the agent's business, and I think I'm trying to fill a gap here by obviously having Australian focus, but also talk about the international football agents business. But I interviewed about 20 Australian agents, from some of the pioneers all the way to today, and got some of their stories, but have included some international material. It's a positive book, but also a book that indicates how hard this business is and how hard it is to move players. The book launch went well. I've got a lot of good feedback. Unfortunately, I got a publisher. I didn't have to self-publish. That's important because a publisher does help you with a lot of things. And it went very well, Jonathan, I would say. And without plugging anything else, I would let it go now and bye from me.
He's far too modest. For those thinking it's solely about Australian agents doing Australian deals with Australian players and clubs, from my understanding it isn't. It features agents, players and clubs from around the world, including our guest Selkie from episode 46, who has unsurprisingly turned out to be very popular with the listeners. And if you don't like the contents of the book, it should make a decent Secret Santa gift for someone, or even quite an attractive doorstop. And just one final comment in regards to my trip to Norway. I was very pleased to meet Kira, who listens to the show, and he said some very nice things about the show and how it has helped him and others in the industry. Plus, he also shared with me some of his ideas on what he would like to hear on the agent's angle. So thank you to Kira for that. And on that, for anyone else listening, new agents, established old-timers like myself and Peter, or those just intrigued by the agent's world, let us know your ideas and requests for future shows, and we'll do our best to deliver. We should be back as normal in 2 weeks' time with a new show, and hopefully our guest won't go missing for that one. So until then, take care and bye for now.
The purpose of the Agent's Angle podcast is to provide news, information and facilitate discussion on regulatory matters, policies, business trends and issues affecting football agents worldwide. The opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only and should never be considered legal or professional advice. Furthermore, the views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you for listening.